and stop this little timer here and get ourselves going. All right. And I'm just waiting on this other image to spin up. Okay. There we go. Hello, Duncan. Welcome. Welcome, Melinda, Narav, Prakash, all you folks coming in. All right. So we are here this morning to, well, morning for me. It might be a little bit later for some of you. So good day, everybody. Welcome to this new session. We will be covering publishing and workflows today for the web experience management. Our topics will be along these four main categories: publishing an item versus publishing a site, publishing restrictions, moving items through workflows, and using the Workbox. And what we've run into of late is that we do have quite the broad audience. Not only do we have the content authors here with us today, we have marketers with us, and we have some developers who have been coming into these courses. We're really appreciative to have you on board. And so welcome. This purpose of this course is to refresh folks on the knowledge that they've gained through various trainings. In many cases, you might receive the training before your implementation is ready to go. And the idea is to come in and just refresh that knowledge, maybe clarify some things that you might have needed to be straightened out. So again, publishing and workflows is our theme today. Again, hello to all of those that are joining us now. The site that I'll be using is a site by the Adventure Company. So the purpose of this site is to provide adventures for folks to go into and get the audience to sign up for events and so forth. Now, today is not all about personalization. That'll be a course that's coming up. Again, we're focusing on publishing and workflows, so we're more behind the scenes. We're going to start out with this section about publishing an item versus publishing a site. Let me get this other thing out of my way here. A couple of screens there. There we go. So publishing is one of the forms of content promotion. The very act of publishing actually copies item versions from the master database to the web database. Now we at Sitecore, we refer to this master database also as a work in progress database. This is behind the scenes. Everything is in your master database. When an item is created and it is not attached to a workflow, it is marked as publishable. When you run the publishing operation, Sitecore will copy that publishable item from that master and bring it over to the web database. Now, let me note this, that once a publishing action goes through and pushes forward information that's new to put up on the site, it also goes the other way around. It checks, the publishing function checks the web database, your target database, and looks for anything that should have been removed because the date has expired. For example, maybe you're running a special, so you have a promotional set of data that's being shown up in a particular part of a web page in a placeholder. And once that promo has ended and reached the expiration date, then the content that is in that placeholder would be either removed or replaced with something else. And so when that publishing action occurs, it is looking at that web database as well to see if there's anything expired, to see if a page has been deleted from the site or content's been deleted, and it will update it and remove it from that web database. All right. Now, publishing targets and your architecture can vary widely, and it may or may not include staging servers, etc. You're going to know your environment. So for right now, we're just going to refer for the rest of this training as your publishing target. I'll reference it as the web. All right. And your work in progress database is your master database. So let me give you two more terminologies in our Sitecore world. The work in progress site is also known as the Content Management Server, CMS. The live site is known as the Content Delivery Server, CDS. When you go to publish an item, you have a couple of options here. You have the ability to publish the site or publish the item. Now I'm going to pause just for a moment. I need to introduce someone to you folks. My associate, Leah. Leah is here and she's going to be keeping an eye out for questions. If you'll notice, there is a questions section in your interface. And I see some questions are starting to roll in. So here's what I'm going to tell you. What we're going to do is make sure that we address your questions towards the end, at near the end of the presentation. Anything that we can't answer directly, we're going to circle back and get the answer to you. As I understand it, what they're doing is notifying everyone what those answers are. Those answers should be coming up pretty quickly. So I have a couple of questions from Alec, a question from Alan, and a question from Alexandra. So again, while I'm in the middle of the quote live show, it will block your questions coming through. So Leah, you're going to be keeping an eye on that for us. And so we thank you for that. And she'll be helping me out towards the end so that I can make sure that I did not miss any of your questions. So go ahead and roll those questions in and we will get to them. All right, so our two options for publishing is publishing a site versus publishing an item. Now, when you're publishing a site, we have three different publishing operations to choose from. And they are incremental, smart, and republish. And you'll notice that when I demonstrate going into publishing, the publishing site will trigger this interface. The publishing operations are the first three up at the top. Next, you can select your language. And the third would be to select all relevant publishing targets for your environment. Remember, that can include a staging server and other types of production architecture. Over on the right-hand side, you'll see publish items. So when we make a choice to select item as opposed to site, we have a little bit of a difference up here up in the publishing operations. We do have Smart Publish, but we do have a broken down into publishing sub-items and publishing related items. Again, the languages and again, the targets. So what I want to cover right now for you is the difference between, in the publishing site, incremental versus smart versus republish. Here we go. Incremental publishing only copies changed items. Emphasize that word there. Changed. The item already exists, but you made a change. You changed the content, you changed the text, you changed the name. So incremental is only looking for those items, and in particular of note, it's looking at the items as they're stored in the publishing queue, Q-U-E-U-E. Now, Smart Publish, let's look at this guy. Smart Publish compares the items between your master and your target databases. It's only going to publish items that have a different revisioning ID field value. So it's a very smart, intelligent, if you will, publishing operation that's comparing IDs of the items between the two databases. And so you can see that because of that, it's going to take a little bit more effort. Therefore, it's going to take a little more time. So you're starting to see a pattern here. Now, republish, that is the last one that we would ever want to choose. Why? Because republish completely ignores what's already existing on a web database and replaces it with everything from the master database again. In other words, republish publishes everything again. So therefore, the footprint of time and wait and how long you have to wait for the publishing action to complete, that's a very heavy publishing operation to choose. So for that reason, it's the last thing that we would want to choose, depending on what our needs are, right? So with all three of these options, publishing copies only the publishable item versions. Publishing removes the deleted and expired items from the target database. Locking an item stops other users from editing the item, but it does not stop an item from being published, which has already been approved and has achieved that publishable state if we start talking about workflows, which we'll talk about those in a little bit here. When you do a publishing operation, one of the things that you need to consider is before you decide to publish, check your items. See if any of your items are giving you indications of validation errors. If you attended the training previously when we went over I believe it was the first one, Leah, if I'm not mistaken, the very first one that we did about items and such, we talked about that validation bar in depth. And the big takeaway for this as regards to publishing are these colors. If it's yellow, the item will publish, but look into the warning. Might be important. If it's red, the item will not publish, and it's critical. An example of that would be alt text on an image. Sitecore requires all images to have an alt text. Okay, let me, I do see a question of, could I back it up just a moment? Sure. They're asking for a repeat on the explanation of an incremental versus smart. So, incremental only changes copied items from the publishing queue. It is not comparing items between the master database and the web database. All right. So once upon a time, a publishing operation was approved and engaged. And in that process, all the items that are going to be published load up in the publishing queue. You see. Now, if you're going to do a smart publish says, I'm not going to look at the queue. I'm going to look at the databases themselves. I'm going to look at the items in the databases. I'm going to look at the revision ID field values. And if there's a difference there, then I'll publish. So it takes a little bit more work, right, to go in and do a smart publishing operation, a little bit more thorough, a little bit more effort behind that. Again, fastest publishing operation is incremental because it's only looking at the publishing queue and it's only looking for items that have been changed. So I hope that that helps you with re-explaining that. Now, let's take a look at, well, hold on just a moment and I'll bring up an instance and show you this. Now, the previous screen, when I indicated that there was a validation error over the right-hand side, this is in the content editor in the upper right-hand corner of the content item. So what I'm going to do is show you what that looks like. Let's bring in our image. Now, warning, the screen's going to get a little blurry. Let me get it settled. And apparently, if I click too fast in here, that can be blurry as well. So I'm going to go to the URL and append /Sitecore to it. And that's going to get us behind the scene. I apologize, I meant to do that before I pulled this over. And let's see, the question is, should we prefer incremental publish over smart publish in case of publishing a site considering performance? You absolutely want to go with the lightest publishing operation possible for that very reason. Very good. The heavier the operation of publishing, the more of a consideration on the performance. No, Imran, incremental publish would not publish new items. Smart publish will only use incremental when you've changed things, not when you're adding new content. You need the smart operation because new items would require a comparison between the two databases. Now let me log in. I'm just going to, for the ease of this, log in as an admin since we're not talking about permission issues, etc., because there will be something else Natasha, I think you have a typo there. You're asking, will you also tell us about how classic publishing is different from, it looks like a repeat there. Oh, publishing service. That one's going to be a little bit more detailed. Can you put that in your other questions under the question tab as opposed to in this conversation? And we can circle back to that later. Just hold on to that question there, Natasha. Okay. We're just waiting on this to, I don't need to save this here. We're waiting on this to load up here. Just a moment. Sometimes it takes a minute. My apologies. It's being a little slow today. There it goes. All right. So, all right. And by the way, yeah, let's go over here and I'm going to fire up the content editor real quick because I want to show you where the publishing operations are. Now, Natasha, I know that you're asking about the publishing service that was introduced in 8.2. So, like I said, there'll be a little bit more detail on that. Quite involved, actually. We start talking about parallel publishing. Let me minimize that. All right. So again, if I can get to that to you in great detail, I will. Otherwise, we will circle back with that answer for you. All right. Here we are looking at the content editor, and I'm just going to expand this little website over here to the left to the home. And I'm going to come over here to the news item. And let's say I wanted to go and look at the publishing operations. I'm up into the publishing tab. And in that previous slide, you saw a little bit about publishing a site versus publishing an item. So to get to those two screens, I was in the content editor. And there are many, many ways to get to the publishing bit. So we'll start with this one, publish site. Hold on just a moment. All right, and you can see that because I chose publish site, this is the interface that we were talking about just a moment ago. So incremental, smart, republish, and so forth. All right, so regardless of the fact that I had an item selected over here on the left-hand side, this interface is disregarding that, and it's looking at the entire site. Okay. Now, notice I don't have a choice of being able to pick up sub items because it's going to grab everything in the entire site, parent items, children, etc. Now, let me cancel that. And again, you can see that this news item, it does have children here. So with the news item highlighted, going back to the publish tab, clicking that drop down, I'm going to select publish item. And here's one of the questions coming through. When to select, let's see here, what was it? Related items when doing a smart publish or incremental. So you can see here that you have a choice between smart publish and republish. Notice what is missing in a publish item dialog box. What do we not see up here in this first group? We don't see incremental. So there is no incremental publishing operation available on a per item basis. That's for site only. But for item, you have a choice of smart publish and republish. And again, authors, marketers, etc., we're always wanting to do a smart publish, not a republish, because that's very taxing to the system, right? And it will take quite a long time. All right. Publishing sub items and related items over here. Notice the difference between this, all right? Sub-items are items within the content tree, children of the parent item, all right? If you're just publishing the item itself, I do not turn on publish sub-items. But if I have made some changes to the parent, and I have also made changes to one of the children, then I'm going to turn on publish sub-items. Now let me turn that off. Well, then what's the difference between sub-items and a related item? So again, sub-items are children belonging to a parent in the content tree on the left-hand side here in the content editor, you can see. Whereas related items would be things like, let's say, a piece of content that you have through associated content allowed to live across multiple pages. So maybe there are 4 instances of a promotional blurb for people to sign up for an event. There's only one item in the content tree, but there are 4 related, say, pages with presentation components hooked to that item. So when you tell it to publish related items, you're just making sure that all of those instances of that related item are also being published as well. So if I made the paragraph change in one, in the item itself, and there were 5 instances of that item throughout the website, those were the related items, we want to make sure that all of those get updated as well. So that is the difference between my publishing of sub-items versus publishing related items. And then, of course, we have the language options and the publishing targets. So those are the 2 options I have when I use the content editor going out to the Publish tab. Now, let me rearrange something on my screen. I'm going to go to the Launchpad, and I'm going to fire up the desktop view. It's one of my favorite views. Looks a bit like the opening scene from the movie Gladiator, if you've ever seen it, except she's not wearing the period appropriate clothing. More modern. All right, in the lower left-hand corner, I'm going to click on the Sitecore logo, and I'll launch, and I will launch the content editor. Now I'll go back to that Sitecore logo in the bottom left-hand corner, and I'm going to launch the Experience Editor. That'll open it up under a new tab at the top of my screen. And I'll go back to my desktop view, and I'm going to come down to the Marketing Control Panel. Actually, down here at the bottom, the Media Library. You can see you can go here, and again, the Media Library over here on the left-hand side. So my point is I'm just setting up as a reminder for those who have not seen this before. I quite often like to look at multiple pages at a time, and I might even come down here to the Media Library and have it open it up in a new tab, and you can see that I can have access to that as well. And again, I'm bringing this up just to remind you that in the Media Library, it is required that your items have an alt text. So let me come over here to some images. And I'm just going to very quickly upload a file. Let me see if I can dig out the image. Where did it go? Hold on just a second. Excuse me a minute. What is it? Training. There it is. There it is. All right. Now let's just grab this image and open it. And I'm going to upload it. I want to set off a trigger a validation error here. You can see in the upper right-hand corner where my mouse is circling, I uploaded an image, and right off the bat, I've got 2 validation errors. The first one, when I hover over it, doesn't tell me anything. The second one, when I hover over it, tells me the alt field is empty. I'll scroll down. Here's the alt field. If I have an error like this, remember that's critical without a value, this item will not publish. And so I'm going to put in the text for it and save it. It'll warn me about the critical errors, then it will save, and the error is gone. And now over here in the upper right-hand corner, I now have a green indicator. Walinda says, does related items include sub-items? No. So if you want related items and sub-items, you need to select both. Very good question. All right, let's see here. All right, so I just wanted to show you how I could trigger that little validation error, and all I did was simply load up an image. That's going to cause a publishing issue, so we want to be concerned about that. Keep those things in mind. All right, let's go over here now. We'll close this tab. Don't need it anymore. And we'll come back over here to the Experience Editor. Now it's fully loaded. I'll go up here to the top, and I'm going to expand the ribbon by clicking on that little caret in the upper right-hand corner. Once I'm here, you can see that there is a publishing setting under the Home tab. We have publishing section. We have the Publish button itself and setting. Notice I don't have Publish an Item option here in the screen. I only have Publish the item itself. I don't have the Publish Site option, is what I was saying. So this looks just like it does with the content editor. It is the same publish item interface. Again, smart versus republish, publishing sub items, publishing related. By default, publish related items, you'll always find that that is selected. You have to choose whether or not you're going to bring in the sub items. There's no sense in putting that weight in there when you've not made an editable change to the children and you only adjusted that parent. So I would not necessarily have to publish that the sub items again if they've already been published. Now there's a question of, and again, we want to, it looks like some of these conversations are coming over into the main chat, Leah. So if we want to make sure that we have, that we grab some of those to put them all in one spot. All right. There's a licensing question. Does opening new windows or tabs count as new Sitecore sessions? We have limited licenses, so I was curious. To my knowledge, no. We're only talking about what you're logged in as, if you will. You're just opening up different views. You're still in one session in the browser. It's not having you notice that just because I open up different tabs, it wasn't making me log in again. I'm still logged in. Let me cancel this over here. So you see on this tab, I'm in the Experience Editor. I'm logged in as the admin. Come back over here to desktop again, logged in as admin. Still same session there. And double check with your Sitecore representative for other licensing questions. My ability to answer licensing questions is rather limited. Speaking of limited, on what I'm allowed to discuss there. All right. So I hope that helps you, Jen. Okay. So again, back into this world of the content editor, Publish has its own tab. So here again, Publish Site, Publish Item. We also have a Change button to the left of that. And you know this is opening up the publishing settings. I'm going to come back to this. If I go to the Experience Editor and I take a look over here, it's not, the button is not listed as Change. The button is labeled as Settings, same interface. And again, I'll talk about that very shortly. We're going to come back over here. All right. Now, one of the things that'll happen is versions. Versions can affect publishing. We're going to talk about that a little bit more when I drop into workflows. You'll see me circle back into the publishing aspect because I'll And when I show you a workflow getting engaged, every time I'm editing an item, it's creating a new version. And then those versions can be marked as publishable or not. And we're going to come into the settings. So you'll see that coming up in just a moment. Let's go back over here for a moment. There we go. So I just wanted to go over that validation and the field validation errors and publishing validation errors. Again, it's this little symbol you're always wanting to keep your eye on, as these little colors right here in the content editor. Okay, now here's an example of publishing targets where first panel over here on the left, we're publishing a site. What was selected was Smart Publish. All languages selected. Notice that in this example, there are two publishing targets. One is the web target and the other is an intranet. So this is a internal and external Sitecore implementation here is what they're illustrating. And when we're working with this interface, what's lovely is being able to work with these multiple targets. This means you can publish your content to multiple Sitecore targets. All right, well, what's that target? You said a target is the public normal website. Yes. It could also include an intranet site. Yes. And it could also include a partner site. So again, what you see in your environment here is going to depend on your environment. So your developers configure the targets so that your business users only need to create the content in one place, select a target, and then publish to that target. So the swim fin items you can see is being published, the people item, there were a couple of items. It's literally going through as a published site, and it's smart. Look between source and target database. Look at that master. Look at this web database. See what's different. Check those revision ID codes. All right. How are we doing so far? All right. Now let's talk about these publishing restrictions. All right. Publishing restrictions. So this is that publishing settings dialog box here. Notice that in this screen, there are two different versions. All right. So I'm going to go and explain this to you. What I'm going to talk about are these three tabs: versions, item, and targets. So I'll do a demo in just a moment. I want to give you the definition of each one of these. All right. So numbered versions, publishable, whether the item is publishable or not, and what your date range is. So you'll notice that in this tab, we have 4 columns: the version number, whether or not the item is publishable, what the range is from, and what the range is to. So in this example on the screen, version 1 of this item is available to be published from April 1st, 2016, and it will remain live on that site and publishable, if you will. Every time you run a publishing operation to update it, etc., smart publishing, it's going to leave this particular version in place between April 1st and June 3rd. Notice there's also a time factor. The second version is going to kick in right when version 1 has expired. Version 2 kicks in, and it runs from 6.3 all the way to 9.4. And at that point, the item ends its published ability. There's no other version down below this. So that means after 9.4, that item will no longer appear on the website. Be careful about ending your publishable to range, that you don't accidentally end up without an item at all because you didn't allow one to remain running until you take the site down. And how does that look? It will look blank. So I'll show you this again. Can you publish separate individual items to different sites by tagging it intranet or internet? Yes, Walinda, that is the purpose. Let me go back a screen. They're asking about, can you select? Can you take item 1 and tell it to go to the internet, and then leave intranet blank, and then go to item 2 and tell it that it can go to the intranet, but not the internet? Yes, you have complete control on that. All right, now, remember that your item's got to be unlocked. We're going to talk about, remember, this is numbered versions. Numbered versions, first tab. All item versions, regardless of versions, all items itself, it's on the second tab. And then publishing targets is on the third tab. Well, let's go take a look at this. Let's get our site back up here. Okay, let me zoom in a little bit so that the font is a little bit easier for you to see. And I'm going to scroll down over here and find an item to publish. Let's say that I want to go to a news article. All right. Now, one of the things, and I have a slide that's going to come up here in a minute. One of the things I like to do is I like to have this quick action toolbar on the left-hand side talking to me. I'm going to right-click on that left. And one of the things I'm going to turn on, unfortunately, each time I want to go turn it on, I have to right-click to turn it on. But so I'm going to have to do this about 4 times. Just take a look. I want to be able to see my locked items. I also want to be able to see locked items. So you'll see I'm right-clicking on these items and turning on what I want to see. Workflow state and publishing warnings. Hold on just a minute. I am being asked a question about our interface here. No, Leah, I do not see what you're talking about. She's checking to see if I don't see it, and there's no way. We're just checking to see if the recording is going. It's not in my view, Leah. And I'm just going to give her this little screenshot. My apologies, folks. Let me just get their troubleshooting. All right, there, Leah. That's what I see. All right, so let's go back over here to this item. So what you can see is that I've turned on my ability to have any kind of indication of items being warned, etc. All right, let me log off as the administrator, and I'm going to come in as a content author. And save. And I'm going to close this, and I'll close that other tab over there. I'm not using it. All right, so I'm logged in as the content author. So I'll re-expand all of this on the left-hand side. We'll go find that news item. There it is. And again, as the content author, I can do the same thing. Right-click that left margin, turn on my locked items, turn on locked items, turn on workflow state, turn on publishing warnings. Now I'm set. All right, let me come in here to this Denmark 1,000-year-old. I would like to make a change on this. Maybe for some reason, there's a, let's see, I'm going to make a change to the number I'm going to put. I'm going to make it older than what it is. I'll change that value from 1,000 to 1,200. I need to lock it and edit it. There we go. Now, as soon as I told it to lock and edit, look over on the left-hand side. So now I have an indicator showing up that this is locked. All right, that's fine. I'll go in here and I will make a notice over here on the right-hand side. Here is version 1 of 1. All right. Now, if this item is in the workflow, then when I make the following change, and I'll put 1,200, no offense, Denmark, I'm just editing a value here. And I'm going to go up here to the edit button. Notice it's telling me that it's in that it is not part of a workflow. All right, so this item is not part of a workflow. Therefore, when I make this change and I save it, it is not going to automatically create a version for me. I want to go ahead and make this a version that I'm doing. So I'm going to make my change back to the 1,000, and I'll save it. And I'm not worried about the broken links for this demo. All right, so I'm going to turn around and make a new version of this, add a version. I'll go ahead and add another one while I'm at it, add a version. All right, we'll do 3 versions here. So right now I'm on version 3. Let me get over here to version 2. All right, notice immediately I'm getting a publishing warning. If you publish now, the selected version will not be visible on the website because it's been replaced by a newer version. So as you work with versions, you're going to get these warnings over on the right-hand side. Remember the indicators. Yellow says I'm warning you about something, but I will publish depending on the limitations that you've set for me. All right, so will it automatically delete a version from web database after publishable to value? Yes. Remember that if you say that a version is no longer publishable, then when you run the publishing operation, that version of the item is removed from the web live target database. It is still in existence in your master database, available should you decide to make it publishable again. That's why an item being marked as publishable or not. Today I want it published, tomorrow I don't want it published. Tomorrow I change my mind, I want it published. Oh, I changed my mind, I don't want it published. As long as I've got versions in there that I can mark as publishable or not publishable, it saves me from having to create and delete versions all the time, because I can set them to date parameters. So we'll do that in just a moment. I wanted you to see what was happening as I was doing this. All right, so I'm just going to add a little title here and just say, let's see, we'll do spring promo, just to give you some different text on here. Whoops. If I could type, that would be great. And then I'll save it. And I'll come over here to version 3. Notice it doesn't have that text. And I will do fall promo and save. All right, now I have 3 versions. Let's go up and take a look at the publishing. By the way, because of that lock, these items are still locked, right? So let me go over here to publish. Locking an item prevents somebody from editing. It's not going to prevent this from publishing operation from happening. Let me go over here to change. Now I'm looking at all 3 versions here. And this is what I was talking about when I was showing you the slide. When, by default, once you start working with versions, your first version, whatever timestamp you had in there, the values disappear. And now it's blank on both sides. And that literally means from the day that the site is live till the day the site is done, run version 1. But we have an exception. So let's just say that this site was live as of January this year. So version 1 was live as of January. It's just not showing the date because that's when the site went live and it was first originally published. Now we've moved forward in time. It's 5/18 for version 2. So we say, yeah, from today forward, we'll have version 2 available, but that's only going to be a 6-week promo. So let's set this to expire. Hold on just a moment. Let me get it to the right time. We're going to have it expire on the 1st. And I could even put a time. Now, I'm going to tell you, be careful of the time. Check with IT. largely for content authors and marketers, just changing the date is fine. Be very careful about changing the time. You also want to check about when do you have scheduled publishing operations, like is your company doing publishings every night? Are they publishing once a week? What is the quote schedule? So I'm just going to leave it on I'll put it to the same time that is here, just so I'll have a smooth transition between these. Okay, and this is based on your server's publishing time. Don't get all that confused with your particular time zone. Server time, again, that's why you want to check with your team to see if there's any time restrictions that you need to pay attention to if you're going to run a manual publishing operation. So remember, if items are connected to workflows, scheduled publishings, they'll happen on their own. Items become publishable once they've reached that final state, which we'll talk about in just a moment. So over here on the left-hand side, come July 1st, let's say that, once we get over to July 1st, I don't want version 2 running anymore. I want version 3 to kick in. And I want version 3 to stay running until we take the site down. So I can leave this blank. All right. If I decide that it's going to have a set time because it's a promo, let me get over here and change this to where it's going to end on August 1st. And again, I'll put the time. Now, in a normal training environment, I'd be asking a lot of questions for the audience and get a lot of feedback. It always depends on how many people we have in the room. So I would have asked my students at this time, all right, now that I've done this, what happens on August 1st, 2:11 or 2:10 p.m.? What version is going to be published and be able to be viewed on the site? So audience, you're pretty responsive here. Do you want to take a stab at that? What version do you think is going to kick in on August 1st at 2:10 p.m. according to this setting that I just set? Nice. Elizabeth jumped in. Version 1 is correct. Ding, 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 ding. All right. Good answer. So this is why you want to take care when you're working with the publishing settings. Don't go speeding around in here. Make sure that you've got the right versions available. Now what if I got a call from marketing that said, hold everything, Michelle. We have not got those promos approved. So we get the time zone coming in, but we don't want any accidents. Could you make those versions not publishable until we get approval? Sure. So the way that a person does that is they just simply come up to the Publish tab under the Content Editor, go to Change, come to the items that you want to disable from publishing. Now those items are not publishable. So here's the thing to remember. Let's say that I created this, I had them lit up, and then I ran a publishing operation. All of this time schedule got copied over into the live database. They're just not showing because the time and date has not arrived. So the data about these two items is on that web server. But if I mark an item, marketing says this is not a go yet. We don't have we don't have that locked in. All right, so let's come in here and make those items unpublishable. And then when I click OK, I'm going to actually have to publish that change. You see, when the publish kicks in, it's going to remind that or go and inform that live database that, hey, this info that you had on these two versions doesn't count. Get rid of it. Remember, it deletes, removes, expired, or deleted. So this item being marked as publishable has been deleted. So that item's publishable state is not there. It's still there in the master, but it's not going to show up on the live data, on the live website on these dates because these two versions are not marked as publishable. So be very careful when you're in the screen as to what you have marked as publishable or not. All right. Why is this a good thing? We want to publish it. No, we don't. Yes, we do. No, we don't. Yes, we do. No, we don't. Sometimes we live in that world where we're getting a lot of back and forth and back and forth. So the beauty is we're not having to delete the whole version item and recreate it. We simply mark it as not publishable, run a publishing operation, and it will be removed from that live website. Now let's go talk about the item itself. Those are versions. So this is a warning. Warning, very important. Specify when you want the item to be publishable. Meaning, if I turn off this item, if marketing says the whole thing is not happening, or your business director, whatever reason, this whole item cannot show up on the website, we do not come over here and turn off the versions. In fact, if you notice, since I marked the item as not publishable, the versions themselves are also not publishable. So in one fell swoop, the entire item will disappear from the site. Be very careful with this guy. Always keep the item publishable and adjust the versions unless it's the item itself that you want to mark as a particular publishable range or not publishable at all, and so forth. The last tab on here is the targets. Under targets, if I had multiple targets listed here, then I would be able to choose the one I want. Usually in your environment, your default publishing target will already be selected for you. And there you go. And I can click OK. All right. Now, let's go over here to our slides again here. All right. So again, restrict your publications by the numbered versions, publishable from and to date times, whether or not your item itself is publishable, and which publishing target that you wish to choose. Okay. And under this point, with working with the publishing, I want to make sure that the item is unlocked. Now, the moving the items through workflows is where we're going to go next, but I want to pause for a moment. So let me go back. And let's go back over here to our site. And let's go into the hamburger icon, the launch pad. And I'm going to open up the desktop. And again, I'm setting this up so I can have the content editor here, and I can have the experience editor here so I can bounce back and forth. And again, over here under, what was going to show you over here? Over here under versions, you have some version control. Over here is the content author, where we can come in and remove existing versions and so forth. This content author is in this example is in a workflow. So every time they make a change, it's going to create a new version of that item. And if I come over here to the home tab, you can see that there are some things that we're not allowed to do as a content author. So I'm not going to go digging around in here for a moment. I want to go right over here to settings. And again, I'm back in that publishing settings, but what we notice is because I'm in as a content author, up at the top, what's it telling me? You cannot change publish restrictions as you cannot modify the items. So permissions are going to drive whether or not you can mark an item as publishable or not, or mark a version as publishable or not, or even whether or not you can make changes. See how it's circled with the line through it? All right. And the idea is that we don't want you to have to make those manual changes themselves. This is a setup where it's been applied to automatically. Now, I'm also not looking at the right item with the versions. So one of my favorite things to do in the Experience Editor is go to the View tab, and I want to turn on the navigation bar. That gives me that little breadcrumb, and I'll navigate my way to the Adventure Company to home, to news, and to that item, Denmark's 1,000-year-old Viking heritage, and click go. And now I'm looking at that page. I'll come back to the home tab. And I'll come back over here to settings. And now you can see the versions are there. But what do we notice? What do I have the options on for this item? I, as the content author, can come in here now and say, oh, yes, we do want, marketing said go ahead and allow that. And I am able to interact with it. So again, my point to you, let me do a little resize here. There we go. My point to you here is permission levels for working with publishing is directly tied into your permissions as who you're logged in as. So those are very, very important. All right. Now let me go over here to some, Leah, do you want to handle some of the, let's do a pause here. All right. Will it automatically, I'm going to go through some of these publishing questions here. Will it automatically delete a version from web database after the publishing to value? Yes, that is correct. Once another publishing operation runs. Just because the date hits doesn't necessarily do something. The publishing operation itself, publish, that's scheduled. Once that happens, then the version would change. All right, I mean, would be deleted. How many versions of an item should we keep in mind considering performance of the site? Great question. The more versions you have, all right, the more of a performance issue you could possibly bear. And again, those kind of questions are best served to talk with your developers and that team, your Sitecore partner, because they'll be able to tell a little bit more about your world. What's the size of your database? What's the restrictions? What's the bandwidth? What time and day of the week are publishing operations occurring? If they're occurring at night, 2 o'clock in the morning, and you don't have a lot of bandwidth being sucked up by a bunch of people on the network uploading and adding new content, you know, because we like to publish during off operation hours. So versions can get really out of hand. So you definitely want a good strict control, everybody be on the same team as to what version's kicking in when, what range is kicking in, restrict the permissions so that you have minimum issues. All right, going through this list here. We're going to come back to Natasha's classic versus the other publishing. Elizabeth is asking if they added a document or image into the media library and then included or linked that document image into a web page, would that document or image be considered a related item so that when I publish that web page and select publish related items, would the document or image be published also? Yes, because it's not like a news article with a Denmark article and a London article. Those are children, so those are sub items as opposed to related items or related content, if you will. Okay. Again, always, you know, I'm answering your questions generically, but I'm warning you what your scenario is set up in regards to publishing can differ between sites, between subsites, between publishing targets, between schedules, and all up to whatever your IT team staff has set up for your publishing parameters. So always circle back and see what are the specific publishing requirements, setup, expectations, configurations for your implementation. Is there an option to not add alt text? For example, according to accessibility standards, alt text should be null for decorative images. That's something you're going to have to reach out to the developers. What I'm speaking of, Heidi, is the default behavior for Sitecore with alt text with images is that the image must have an alt text. Any deviation from that is going to have to be done by the hand of your developer. So you'll touch base with them and let them step in for being able to handle the alt text with the accessibility standard issues. All right. Does opening a new window tab count as we already talked about that? Licensing. Is there a way to add workflows to multiple items simultaneously that don't already have a workflow applied? That is a great question, Simona. So are you talking about items that already existed and then all of a sudden you decided to come in on the other side and add them into a workflow? There are scripts that can run. There's a couple of different ways to go about that. I would need some clarification on that question. Yes, there are publishing logs where you can get a detailed, you can get a log of what's been published. Let's make sure, Leah, that on that question, if you could write a note for me, let's see if we can find the, there's a documentation on that, on the Sitecore documentation. So who was asking that? Yamna. Yeah. Publishing viewing logs. And I'll when we post the answers, maybe we can post that link to that article. All right, let's see here. Angela, we've been seeing a lot of issues with publishing where a checkbox is selected to enable fallback languages, for example, but the publish action does not pick this up. The checkbox is selected, fallback languages. Yeah, it sounds like it's either going to be item related, that there's something disabling that language version, even though you've got it marked as publishable. There might be something else under the hood that is keeping it from being publishable. So the first thing that you want to check is to check on that tab. Let me come over here and show you. Let's go back over here, settings. All right, so hold on just a second, I'm in the wrong one. Let me get to the content editor. All right, so over here under publish, under, let's see, which way do I want to come in? And because there's your restrictions. Oh, I know why. The viewpoint that I want, I can't see it as a content author. Are you talking about people that are logged in as content authors, Angela? A lot of issues where the checkboxes allowed publishing languages, but hold on just a second. Let me get over here to this slide. That'll be easier for me to point this out to you. Answer her question. So let me go back. All right. So what I want to show you is, here we go. All right. So we're talking about publishing languages here. So you usually have, if you have a different versions, different language, etc. You notice that my interfaces didn't have publishing language because I didn't have a language version of that item. But yeah, these options here about being able to publish the different languages to enable, but for some reason it's not picking up. All right, the only thing I can think of is that there is something behind the scenes that's preventing your version of that item in that language. I would say reach out to your devs. If there's sometimes things that can interfere with the publish action and the item, the fallback language does not get picked up. Yes, have seen that before. So if that happens, you're going to have to reach out to your developers. There's something else coming in and overriding whatever publishing settings you've seen. Because as an author, as a marketer, admin, we only have these interfaces, but there are things that could happen due to some automation somewhere else that could cause that override. All right, let's see here. Is there a way to create a published workflow that includes a review step? Yeah, we'll get to that workflow question in a minute, but yeah, you could actually just add other workflow steps. We'll talk about that in a minute when we do workflows. We have over 100 users in Sitecore at one time. What is the best strategy to ensure staged content stays staged until it is intended to go live? We've created a custom workflow, but we've still encountered content going live to production prematurely. Alec, that is a really great question. And for the sake of this audience in this class, that's going to be a little bit more detailed. We will circle back on that answer when you're talking about strategy to ensure that stage content stays staged. I could start discussing like 4 or 5 different strategies. So let me circle back with the team and find out the best way for us to answer that for you and give you some additional resources. How do you balance the ease of use for the content managers with preventing unwanted items from publishing as it relates to decisions about placing pages and data sources into workflows? Again, remember, guys, these questions are great, but just in light of time and in purpose of this, that's going to require a little bit more answer as well. So let's circle back on that one. Because again, that's a strategy question, yes? So there's a couple of different ways to approach it. The bottom line is that you want to, developers are always setting up the tightest restriction possible. You assign the permission, the minimum permission it takes to allow that functionality by that person. So if you have a lot of users working with workflows is great. All right. This ease of use question that Alan has for preventing unwanted I can't talk. Preventing unwanted items from publishing as it relates to decisions about placing pages. Again, it's that strategy and workflow. Content authors should have the least amount of publishing options available to them so that if you have instructions coming out from the back end via script or code or however you've got it running, that they can't override that. So yeah, we'll have to come back to that one. Alexandra, yes, we are recording them, although there was a question about today's, and I suppose if it ends up that this did not get recorded, we could maybe run it again so we can capture that. All right. Okay, so let's get into some workflow information. All right. Okay, so let me get back over here to workflows. And we'll talk about what workflows are. That was a really good session on the publishing part. And that also helps us, folks. These questions of yours, that'll help us to make sure that we've got the right documentation up. And if we don't have something there, maybe we can get something created to help you with these questions. All right, so I think everybody here is familiar with workflow, but just in case you're not, a workflow is allowing an item, it can allow an item to either be publishable or not. A workflow is going to be based on the organization business process. Now you can set 10 teams down in the same room, give them the same parameters, give them the same instructions on what type of workflow to create, and then let them be creative and come back in, you're going to have 10 different results. So that's part of that whole strategy. A workflow is based on an organization's business process. It's a series of steps that a numbered version of an item must go through. A workflow is used to control your access, enforce quality, automatically version the items, and allow certain business users to publish. So here comes that little that little thing behind, you can put a lot of parameters in place. But if you've got a restriction on who can publish or who cannot publish, that can cause an issue with um, expectations of a team being able to publish. They may not even have that ability. So always got to check on what were the organizational needs, how were things set up in regards to handling that. All right, so in this illustration, what you're seeing is that a workflow, an item is created, like the versions that I created in my example, and that's a draft state. And it remains there, not publishable, and it awaits for approval. Once it becomes approvable, once it becomes approved, now the item gets marked automatically by Sitecore as publishable. I'm going to say it again. You create an item, you submit it, you get it approved, it gets approved, Sitecore marks it as publishable. So there's nothing you have to do, because the minute you go to publish the site, your item is going to get published because it was approved. So you might want to circle back and say, yay, it was approved, but I want to make it not publishable for this time range. You know, that's why we have that interface there where you can come back in behind it. Now, in the Sitecore world, when it comes to workflows, you can have as many states as you want. And within each one of these states, you're going to have a command, because a command is what moves an item from one workflow state into another. So here you see this draft initial state. The next state that item needs to go through is the awaiting approval state. But in order to move the item from the draft state to the awaiting approval state, we have to click the submit button. That's the command button. Now the next step is to either approve it with test, multivariate testing, approve, just straight up approve, or reject. So once these actions, if you choose to approve, for example, it moves it into the last state, which is approved. Now, of these three states, the initial workflow, draft, awaiting approval, and approved, there's only two that Sitecore requires. Sitecore requires the initial workflow state and a final. Every workflow must have at least two states. What you have in between is up to you. Can it be very, very complicated? Yes. Can it be very simple? Yes. Is there lots of opportunities in between there to get a little confusing? Yes. This is why team conversations, everybody being on the same page, is really, really important. You know? So in regards to working with these workflows, there's going to be actions. I want to point out what these actions are, because like I said, once you approve, you're now in the final workflow state. Once it's in that specific state, final, then the item gets marked as publishable. So you'll see this. When an item enters a workflow state or a workflow command is fired, we have a couple of actions that are going to kick in. The first action here, auto publish action, final workflow state. If you know, hey, Sitecore is looking at it. Hey, is this item in the final workflow state? Okay, you're publishable. If it's not publishable. And if you run a publishing operation and it was once approved, and then it became a new version's coming out, that's going to be the item becomes unpublished. If it's ever marked as not publishable, it will be removed. Remember that. Now, this isn't necessarily in any order, because here's the thing. If the validation error, think about it, the validation error is going to run. So even if an item is marked as publishable, if you've got a red critical validation error, doesn't matter, it's not going to publish it. It will literally stop it in between one state to another. So if I've got something in the draft state and I have a validation error, even if you approve it, it's not going to publish. Why? Because it has a validation error. What kind? Not the yellow warning, but the serious red validation type of errors. Okay, hold on just a second. I just flipped the other screen and it looks like another question here. Hold on just a second. Is there a way to automatically delete versions from all databases and maybe cap it at 5 versions for each page? Yes, talk to your developer. Existing items. That's correct, Simona. That. There we go. Angela, you'll have to clarify what you want for an advanced settings there when you're talking about languages. All right. So let me get back over here. Again, this is a reminder about your quick flow, or your workflow with the quick action bar and being able to see that workflow state in place there, because it's very nice to be able to see when an item has that. All right. Now, these are just some common quick actions for your content authors. All right, so let's talk about, before I get into workflows with associated content, let's get back over here to our site. And I'm going to expand the adventure company and home and news. And let's take a look at the Denmark item again, where I have 3 versions. Okay, I'm going to take a look at the preview again. You can see preview is just letting me go into another tab to preview an item. I can go to any version and preview it. I can also use this little timestamp up here in the Experience tab to pick a date and time, so I can go and take a look at a version that will be publishable as of a date. It's kind of like a time machine. So I can use that to navigate through my different versions to be able to see the different times. So look at this item at this time, and it'll show that particular version. So I'm just going to close that little tab there. All right. And again, let's go over here to the publishing viewer. I'm at the publishing section. I wanted to show you this new tool. When you're in the content editor and you choose the publishing viewer, this is a nice way to see all 3 of your versions of an item and exactly what's going to happen in the timeline. So you can see this little stair stepping, and you can see that version 1, and if I hover over it, the little timestamp will pop out. So this version is going to run all the way through until 5/18, and then version 2 is going to kick in till 7/1, and then 7/1, the new version kicks in, and then back to version 1. So this is a nice graphic interface available to you called the publishing viewer. You can't change the operations. You're just viewing the publishing schedule. Now, let's see here, over here, she said, oh, yeah. She's asking about in the advanced section for an item. Let me get down to, well, you know, I can't see it under this person, but I could if I was in as an editor. There is an advanced section in the content editor where there's a checkbox, enable item fallback, display item fallback language if no language version exists. Yeah, so if I have Japanese and English, but for some reason I don't have the Japanese version, it's going to fall back to the English. What's your question? I lost your question there, Angela. Let me log in as an administrator. All right, let me get into the content editor. All right, so there's our quick info. Hold on just a second to get to the item. All right. So where am I? on just a second. Oh, well, again, yeah, she's saying that under the fallback, item fallback, that the check box doesn't always get picked up by the publishing action. That's correct. It doesn't. There might be some stuff, like I said before, running underneath the hood that the devs have got engaged. If that happens, you need to check with them. There could be something that they've done that's overriding that. But by default, it should do that. No problem. Now, I want to show you something real quick here. I need to get back in as the content author. Let me log in. When it comes to workflows, there's a couple of different ways to get into the Workbox, all right? So the slides will catch up to us in a moment. Here in the content editor, if I'm looking for the content editor, and let me expand that, etc. Down at the bottom, you'll see a tab here that says Workbox. And if I click on that, you can see this Workbox environment, all right? I'm going to go in the upper left-hand corner and turn on the one workflow that is here in this site. Right now, I don't have any items here that are waiting approval. Let me get over here to the content editor because I'm not on the right item. Let's go over here. There we go. News. There we go. Now, let me go to the workbox. And I don't have, oh, that's right, because I didn't create my new little, hold on just a second. I'm having, don't you love it when it happens in a demo? Here we go. All right, there's our 3 versions, etc. Okay, now if I take a look over here and hover, you can see that there's the lock. Here's the little globe icon right here. And it's telling me if I publish now, the selected version will not be visible because it's been replaced by an older version. That's that time zone factor there. And that's, if you ever see that, that's a signal of make sure you're working with the right version. Okay. Now, again, I'm going to come over here to this workbox. And if I look over here, I've got nothing waiting for approval. Let me log out. Let me come back in as admin. Content editor. Let's get to our site item. Let me go to the workbox. Let me in the upper left-hand corner come down and turn on the sample workflow. And I don't have items here. Why? The main reason I don't have items is I created the work versions. I didn't move it through the workflow. I've got the versions of my items. I didn't put it through the workflow. So let me get over here as the content author again. And the content editor. Go find my items and push it through that workflow. So I'll go to news. Denmark. All right. Now if I take a look at my different versions, all right, if you take a look up here at the top, I have my edit, and you can see that the item is not currently part of a workflow for this example. Let's go see where another item is for my workflow. I had an item and I lost the item, so we'll have to create an item just for this experience. Let's go to, let me go to an event, skiing event, and I'll expand that. All right, let's go ahead and create a new item. And I'm just going to call this my event detail and click OK. There we go. And let's just go ahead and give it a name. Let's see, let me put some data in here. So I'm just putting a little note. And I'm going to save that item. And it says, please enter a number 1 through 1 to 10. Let's see what that required field is. Well, isn't that interesting? I'll do skiing. 2. We'll just say that that number is 2, and we'll call it save. There we go. So I just put a little event detail item in there. And it says, will not be, you'll notice I'm getting a notice here. If you publish now, selected version will not be visible on the website because it's not in the final workflow step. The example I was using earlier wasn't hooked up to a workflow. Now, if I come over here, you can see another icon. So there's draft. So now we have an item here waiting to be approved. All right. So I can go over here to the workbox. And now I have an item in that draft. Once you have an item available, instead of it saying none, it says however many items are in that state. So in the draft state, there's this one item. So I can select the one or select them all. So if I have multiple items, they'll be here. When I click submit and I don't mark it, I'll get a warning. Select it, submit it. Now we have nothing in the draft state, but I do have an item here awaiting for approval. Okay. So this is being able to go in and being able to take an item you've created, submit it for the workflow. One option to submit it is in your workbox itself. Another option to submit it is in the content editor itself. By going to the icon, this is a clickable, actionable item. So I can click on this item here, and if I had permission, I could approve and reject. All right, so let me log out as the content author, come back in as the admin, and we'll go ahead and push that through. So the content editor, expand, we'll go find that item, home, and let's see here, we did events, skiing, there's the my event detail, here is the awaiting approval, and I can click here, and now it's lit up and I can approve or reject the item. All right, so let me come back over here to the PowerPoint just for a moment to catch you up a few things. Because what I've shown you was the content editor, being able to get into the workbox. Another place where you can work with your workflows is in with your associated content. Notice these screenshots. This is in the experience editor. And what I want to show you is right here. When you work with an item in the experience editor, when you select the item, the floating toolbar opens. You'll always have a notice here about what the status is for the workflow. You'll also see how many other items are using this content elsewhere, the associated content. So that's what your usage is. Okay. So let me go and get into, this is the screen that I was just at. I just didn't have the options in it when I was in the workbox to have as many items. There's 2 items here, and then the options of approve it with the test, the one item, all of the items, just approve the item, just approve all of the items. So these 2 are without a multivariate A/B split test versus these 2. Reject the one or reject them all. Really, really easy to work with. So when you're in the workbox, again, here's yet another way. So I'm going to remind you, when you're in the content editor, you can use that little margin on the left-hand side if you've got those little indicators turned on. You can click on the tab that says Workbox down at the bottom. Up in the launch pad, you can go directly into the workbox here. And whenever you go into the workbox, you're going to open up and end up in this view where you're looking at the items. Now, something that's interesting about working with this workbox is the fact that this only shows 2 rows at a time. You can restrict how many items per page. But the one thing that I want to point out is being very careful. I'm going to talk about RSS feeds in a minute. Always make sure that you're careful about which one of these bars it is that you're making an adjustment, because it could be to the one item or this item or to the entire workflow itself. Be real careful not to make changes to the workflow itself and disengage it accidentally. So your steps for using this workbox is to go in, select the workflow, which is what I just demoed there. Show all of your workflow items that you want to see. Expand any of the states, meaning the states are these little black bars. First one is the workflow itself. Second one are the states. Here's the draft state. Here's the awaiting approval. Over on the right-hand side, the little carrots, being able to expand those. Version history. Do not ignore this. There is some options in regards to being able to see changes that were made to the item, viewing the history. And so being able to see a preview, open it up, look at the differences, or submit. Those are links. You can also do a preview it or compare it to all the existing ones. So I'm going to show you that right now. Let's go over here and take a look. And let's say that I wanted to go into the workbox. And I see that there's one item to be approved. Maybe I'm the one that has to make the approval. And what I want to do is, if I go to preview, it's going to open up like the preview view, like the experience editor that you saw earlier. Opening the item itself opens it in the content editor. I'd like to choose diff, D-I-F-F. If I choose diff, this allows me, much like in the content editor where you can go up and click on the versions tab, you can compare the differences. You have a choice of 1 column or 2. I prefer 2 columns so that I can do a side-by-side comparison so that I can see what the differences is between the items and so forth. So that's an option that you have of being able to view your workflows versions and compare them. And then those are the commands. And then there's the RSS and subscribe. So the thing about the RSS with streaming is, how are you getting notified about your workflows? All right. How are you getting notified about your workflows? So we're going to talk about this in just a moment. Let me get your attention back to our site here. And let me get back into the content editor, because I wanted to remind you, up under the versions tab, here's where we can see the version numbers, adding and comparing, removing versions, changing those languages. Translate, warning, this is not a Babel translation tool. If I click translate, what it does is it shows me the other column for the language so I can compare. You're either manually doing translations or you're hiring a third-party service to do that as well. Some of our Sitecore partners do that. I'm going to click this drop down over here, and you can see that this site was already configured, so I can look at and see the Japanese side and what I'm comparing. But notice, one is viewable, this one is editable. You see, the one on the right is not, the one on the left is. So if I could write kanji and read it, then maybe I would want to swap these 2 places here for working with those languages. But this is not a click the button and Sitecore builds it in Japanese for you. That's not a built-in factor. All right. Let's take a look here. I want to see if I'm dropping some questions here at the moment. And it's being a little slow to respond. There it goes. Okay. Let's take a look on this. All right. don't have a new one there. Great. Okay, let's get back over here. Let's talk about the fact that if I'm in Sitecore and I wanted to come over here to the workbox, let's just pretend that we had a lot of items waiting. Let me just go over here and create several versions of items waiting to be approved. So we'll just create a new news detail, and I'll call this mine. All right, and we're going to save it. And notice I've got some critical errors. Let me hold on, cancel. What errors do I have? So I have 3 reds and 1 yellow. First one just says, hey, you've got an error. That's why nothing shows up when you hover over it. Second one says, you need to have some text in that summary field. Good, that's a required field. Third one says, the body also needs a value. Okay, so let's go over here to the summary. And I'll say, this is my summary. And we'll come back over here to the news body. This is the news body. And accept. Now I'll save it. This time it complained again, but I clicked OK, and now it took the item. All right. So this item now is existing. All right. But notice again, this item is not hooked up to a workflow. All right. If it was, I'd have these workflow warnings over here, like I had with the events when I came over here and created my own new skiing event. All right. So let's say that let's go ahead and do one more skiing event, just so we've got another item to show up. New event detail. And we'll give it a new event. This one's cycling. We'll give this one a 7. We'll call it save. All right, now let's come back over here to this workbox. And now you can see I've got an item up here under draft as well. All right, so let's talk about the RSS feeds. Most people would probably, if they have a lot of content to have to approve, it's not fun to always come in here and start clicking around just to see if something's waiting for your approval. So we have the ability to work with these RSS feeds. Those are over on the right-hand side. You'll see the little gold icons. Now, warning, it's important that you pay attention to which one you subscribe to. Are you going to subscribe to the whole workflow? I wouldn't do that. If my job is just to move something, just to approve something, I just need to subscribe to what's waiting approval. Or if I want to know when something gets created, then I would subscribe to the draft. So let's get back over here and talk about these real quick. All right, 3 different types of client RSS feeds. Item feed. Keep me up to date on the item or the version of the item that it goes through. I'm a content author. I'm trying to keep track of what's going on. That's important to me. Item feed. Workflow feed, that's the step that's next in the process. The person that has to approve, maybe. So they might want to approve the item, or they might want to know about the entire workflow feed. So warning, this is everything. You subscribe to this, every workflow state. So you have to be careful. It's going to let you know, hey, there's all this stuff that's available every time. Like say I email, I'm going to get a lot of emails, right? And then a particular state. So tell me about the item, tell me about the whole workflow, or tell me about a particular state of the workflow. So approval, for example. So let's take a look at being able to do that subscription. These are the icons that we're talking about here. So all you have to do is click that little radio button next to the feed of the workflow itself, or to the state. So I might want to the approval state. And once you decide to go with an RSS feed, This is what the output looks like. Nice little output where it's going to tell you this is the status, these are the items, this is what version, what language. Then it asks you, do you want to approve it or add a comment, reject it? Do you want to make a change? All the details are brought out to us in that view. And so it's quite helpful. All right. Now let's say that I wanted to subscribe to the item itself. Notice this interface here. So let me go and show you both of these, all right? Because one of the things that you need to know is that when you're subscribing to RSS feeds, you have two choices. You can view the output in your browser, or you can have it show up in your email, all right? Let's go over here to our site. And let's say that I want to subscribe to this awaiting approval. So I'll click on that RSS feed and we'll wait because this new tab is opened up. And it blew up on me. Rewind. Well, that's a terrible example. Let me try a different. Don't you love it when something blows up on you in a demo? I know there's got to be some devs in the group that are going, yeah, this happens. They pull up another browser. So if you want to configure those to email, there are some steps as well as that. I'm going to include a link. I'm not sure, Leah, where we're going to put that link. So let's go to, let me go over here. All right. And let me go over here and log in. And it did it again. And the demo slows down. It's fine. Don't show it. You're just not going to let me in? Go. Well, for some reason, Edge just doesn't want to play with me today. All right, we'll deal with that later. All right, so I apologize that my example for you is not doing very well. And we don't have time for me to troubleshoot this real quick. All right, now we come back to the PowerPoints. Wah, wah, wah. My apologies. Had it played nicely with me, it would have displayed, whoops, back over here, like this on this upper right-hand corner. Web pages, what I'm showing you right here is that basically if you open this up in the browser, you can subscribe to the feed and have it bookmarking being kept in your favorite center so that you can go into your feeds folder in Edge or in Chrome, etc., and be able to take a look at your workflow information, or you can look at email and just check with your devs to see if that's an allowable thing for your environment. There may be a security factor on that as to whether or not you can or cannot subscribe to the RSS feeds. And again, the subscription icons are located here, or also located here. Let me get into the content editor. And when you're working with your RSS feeds, take a look at the tab Review. So for your notes, Content Editor, Review tab, And here's the subscription. So I could decide to let me subscribe to all the news items. And again, I'm getting that blow up again. So my apologies. Like I said, what I wanted it to do, it did not, which was to display this date over here on the right-hand side. So please don't take that as you can put it as a fail on the demo, but not fail on the product. This does work in the Sitecore environment. And you just wanted to talk with your devs and see if you have any restrictions on being able to subscribe to those feeds. So our whole point to today was to go over all of those details, refresh your memory. We also wanted to discover what kind of questions we can give you a little bit more support on. Post this training, we will have this posted, the recording, and if not, Leah, I guess we can do another recording. And we will also, I'm not quite sure how they're going to set up the responses, but all of the questions from these webinars will have answers. In some cases, we may have to reach out to our own talent pool for very specific granular questions that we saw coming in last week from the developers themselves who attended training. So we will update this. So let me just see if there's any. Let's see here. Alec, custom workflows, is this common? Absolutely. Absolutely. Hold on just a second. Let's get back. Hold on. Let's get back over here. Let me log in as an admin. Let me show you a step further. I'm going to come down here into system. So if I wanted to create a workflow and or adjust the target, your admins, these are where your publishing targets are. You can see this site only has an internet. Let me get over here to the workflows. Here's my workflows. So you can see that by default, Sitecore comes with a couple of workflows on its own. This sample workflow is something that somebody had built, all right? And I'm going to expand this. Let me zoom in so you can see this a little bit better. All right. So what I want you to notice is, here's the quick info of that sample workflow. I'm going to collapse this. All right. The workflow itself, you create a workflow, you give it a name. You cannot fill out this first field until you actually create your states. So the workflow gets created, gets a name, and then we right click on that workflow and we come down over here to insert and we insert a state. Once we've inserted that state, then we can decide what the name of the state is. Let me expand this. And what the commands are that are connected to that state. So we can right click on that state and add the new command. You can also do these things up here from the ribbon as well. All right. Now, each state, after I've created the workflow, then I create the states. Then within each state, I bring in the command. And remember the command, the purpose of this little guy here is to move the item from the draft state into the approval state. If I go into approval state, it also has a command, approve or reject. Once it gets approved, then it moves. If I look at this command, you can see here, it moves to this workflow state, approved. So there's a little drop down that populates so that we're able to go in here and create all of the different states. And notice that after I've brought in all the states, after we've brought in all the commands to connect it to the states, we come back to the workflow itself, hook it up to the first state that is the initial state. So the initial state is whatever state you put in this field, which should be your first. Okay. Now, if I go over here to the draft state, are you final? No, so it's not checked. Awaiting approval, are you final? No, so it's not checked. Approved, are you final? Yes. So again, Sitecore requires minimum 2 states per workflow. You need an initial, call it whatever you want. In this case, it's draft. and you need a final. This one's called approved. So, Alec, your question about custom workflows, we can make this as complicated as we want. And there are some complicated workflows. The bottom line is hooking workflows up, creating them in Sitecore itself is easy. That's not the challenging part. The challenging part is get everybody on the same page and open up Visio or some other program and literally do a workflow of what we think our do a flow chart of what we think our workflow process is. It depends on your organization. How many levels do you have? You can make this as thick as you want. So this is for example, they just have a couple of them in here. So here's an analytics testing, draft, deployed, canceled, completed, canceled, suspended. And you can start digging through each one of these and you get the idea of just how deep and granular you can take any of the workflows. And again, Sitecore comes with a couple of workflows, a sample workflow that's there, but you'll need to create your own workflows. Now let me see if I'm missing anything else on here. All right, let's see here. Under the advanced section in the content editor, checkbox can enable fallback. I already talked about that one. Yeah, Angela, it doesn't always get picked up by the publishing action. You're right. Circle back with your devs. All right, Sahina, thank you very much. All right, advanced publishing and workflow can be arranged. All right, Sahana, let's see here. Who can we get you in contact with? There should be an email address when you guys filled out the form, I believe. Don't quote me, but there should be a URL that you can reach out to and put that request to. If not, I'm going to grab a screenshot here because you're right. Some of these questions that have come through are advanced publishing, and that was not right. Exactly. We had limited time, but we're going to gather these questions and either we'll get an FAQ or some sort of answer or something like that, or maybe create another one of these little queued up webinars, small webinar, largely an experiment. We haven't done this before, right? So feedback is good. Thank you. All right, Jen, customize a workflow to auto-publish to our stage server once it was approved. Originally thought we'd have a lot of roles and bureaucracy where lots of people have to approve content before it went live. This easy customization made our lives more efficient and no developers were needed. Very good. Okay, so let's see here. Customized it to auto-publish to the stage server once it is approved. All right, let's see here. I've got some stuff popping up here in the way. So Jen, this was a yes, do customize it. We did this. It was awesome and it turned out easy and you don't have a question. You're sharing some very exciting information for folks. Yes, need a little bit more talk on the advanced, but I'm telling you, one of the things that Sitecore doesn't do is Sitecore does not teach you how to design your workflows, right? They have not had a workshop on that per se. As a trainer, I like to tell my students, ask not, this is what I tell my daughter, ask not, get not. Ask for it. I cannot make that promise for you. I think it would be a great thing to do. Maybe if we all keep asking, maybe they would get enough demand going. You feel me? So I hope that you can do reach out, and let's not forget our partners. Sitecore partners really spend a lot of time and effort working with you to help you with these customizations of workflows. They're very good at it. And in that world, start there. You know, first question you should ask yourself, do we have a Sitecore partner? If you don't, reach back to your person that manages your Sitecore account and see what they can do for you to hook you up to some partners. We have some excellent partners who are very, very good with some very complex, very robust. We're talking Fortune 500, Fortune 100, very large health, government, insurance, all these sites, rules and regulations, all those things have to adhere to. Workflows become critical so that things don't get dropped. And again, this was the hey, what does Sitecore do with workflows? How does it handle? No, it's not the advanced topic of it, but there are some depths. So reach out to that partner, get some associates on it, put a request in. Maybe your partner could create a nice workflow workshop. I'm going to twist my tongue up trying to say that too fast. Say that 10 times real fast. I'll fail. And maybe they can put something together for you. And again, you know, if I keep here with this audience, I'll just keep talking, but I have well exceeded our time. I wish I could have kept you a little bit longer. Don't worry about those questions. We'll figure out a way to get those answers. I was assured at the last one that all questions that are answered, everyone who attends the webinar will be able to see the answers to all the questions. So if 3 other people ask some really good questions, but they weren't yours, don't worry about it. We'll get you an answer to that. All right, but just do give us a little time because there's some other classes and such going on, but we're working at getting this up as fast as we can. So again, thank you so much for your time and attention. Do come back and see us. We have another session that is coming up, I believe, next week. I'm not looking at a calendar. So go check the web location that brought you here. And until then, stay safe, stay well, and thank you for your company today. Bye-bye.